Moving to Europe now, when Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow is ready for a deal with Ukraine, though key details remain unresolved amid fresh strikes on Kyiv that killed at least 12 people. Lavrov defended the attacks, claiming they targeted military-linked sites. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump criticised the Kremlin's actions on social media, urging Putin to stop. State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce says both Russia and Ukraine must make concessions for peace, following Trump's remarks accusing Zelenskyy of blocking progress over Crimea, while US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is set to meet Russian President Putin as peace talks between Russia and Ukraine continue. Let's listen to what Donald Trump has had to say.
Like last night, I wasn't happy with it. And we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired. And I was not happy with it. That's what I...
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy rushed back to Kyiv, cutting short his South Africa trip. Zelenskyy says the missile that struck a Kyiv apartment block overnight, killing 12, was a North Korean-made KN-23 used by Russia. Ukraine's military believes Pyongyang has supplied Moscow with nearly 150 ballistic missiles, and it's now used in attacks across Ukraine. North Korea and Russia deny such transfers, but Ukraine says cooperation has surged since 2022. The strike has raised alarm not only in Europe, but also in South Korea and across Asia over the growing North Korean military reach. In the latest development, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says it's Russia, not Ukraine, that must act to advance peace talks. Speaking at the White House after meeting President Trump, Rutte said Kyiv is playing ball and the next move lies with Moscow. His comments follow Trump's criticism of Ukraine as pressure builds on both sides to find a diplomatic path forward. Here is what the NATO Secretary General has had to say.
Where the Ukrainians are really playing ball, and I think the ball is clearly in the Russian court now.
Well, joining us to discuss the latest developments in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, a Middle East affairs expert who is joining us from Singapore. Rohan, thank you ever so much for being here today. I want to look specifically at the statements that we've seen from Russian Foreign Minister Dmitry Peskov, saying that Russia is ready for a peace deal with Ukraine. This, of course, follows the deadly strike that's been reported in Kyiv, reportedly killing 12 people. Is this conflicting messaging a continuation of the Russian rhetoric we've seen, or do you think Russia is genuinely interested in ending this war?
The attack that killed 12 and injured 90, it was an apartment block. It was not a military facility. The Russian government said it's a military facility, but it is not. And of course, the Americans were very correct. They identified the missile being of North Korean origin. What is important is to see what President Trump told Vladimir Putin. He said, Vladimir, stop. And Trump also told Zelenskyy that he shouldn't talk too much about Crimea because Crimea was already taken by Russia over a period of time. And of course, Russia has built a huge base and a capability, and they are not willing to give up on Crimea. What is important is that Donald Trump has emerged as a credible mediator. He wants both the Russians and the Ukrainians to come together to usher in an era of peace and harmony. He's very much disturbed by what happened by the Russian attack. He was also disturbed by the comments made by Zelenskyy. And I believe that both these leaders should listen to Trump at this point if there is going to be peace in Ukraine.
Yes, Professor Gunaratne, I just want to correct my earlier comment. It wasn't Dmitry Peskov, it was Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov who was speaking about Russia being ready for a peace deal. I want to touch on a point that you made there, the reported use of a North Korean missile. Ukraine says 150 have been handed over to Russia. We know there are reports of tens of thousands of North Korean troops potentially fighting for Russia on the front lines as well. What's the significance of North Korea's involvement in this European conflict?
North Korea is a major weapons producer, and for it to have funds, especially foreign currency, it continues to provide weaponry to a number of players. Russia is one of them. North Korea not only provided weaponry but also provided manpower. So what is important is that the international community should work also with North Korea to ensure that this supply is not sustained. So there are a lot of people with interests, weapons selling interests, and that is why the North Korean flow of weaponry should be contained and disrupted and dismantled. So I believe that the Russian president is committed to peace. To answer your question, I also believe that Zelenskyy is committed to peace, but both these leaders will have to make sacrifices in order for Ukraine to be at peace in the future.
Yes, Professor Gunaratne, to end our discussion, I want to look at the conversations that we know are going to be taking place and have taken place within the last few hours. Of course, Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, talking about the fact that Ukraine is playing ball. We also have this meeting upcoming with US Envoy Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin. What do you think will happen in that meeting? What will be the US rhetoric, given that most parties are pointing the finger at Russia now and saying it's up to them to decide what happens with this peace deal?
Russia should stop its military operations, especially after this devastating attack. It's one of the worst attacks that has taken place. It's clearly a civilian target. And I believe that this particular attack, and of course Trump's comment, Vladimir, stop, is a very good message for Russia. Putin can stop this war. So there are two very strong leaders, Putin and Trump, and I hope that they will come to a consensus on this, how to stop the war and how to move forward. Zelenskyy, of course, he will have to listen to Trump, otherwise Zelenskyy will be displaced.
Yes, Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you ever so much for joining us. We will, of course, be across all of the developments from the Russia-Ukraine war and that meeting between Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin.